Have you ever just stopped and wondered why English can sound so different depending on who's speaking? Well, today we are diving deep into that fascinating story of American versus British English. We're going to cover everything from vocabulary and pronunciation all the way to the surprising history that created this tale of two accents. Okay, let's just jump right in with a classic and sometimes really embarrassing mix-up. So, if you're an American in London and you tell someone you like their pants, guess what? You're actually complimenting their underwear, not their trousers. Yeah, this one little difference is the perfect way to kick off our whole exploration of a single language separated by a very wide ocean. So, beyond those awkward fashion compliments, the most obvious difference, the one you notice right away, is in our everyday vocabulary. Let's take a look at just a few examples of how these two languages really started to go their separate ways. I mean, look at this. The differences cover pretty much everything from where you live to what you eat. An American lives in an apartment and takes out the garbage, while a Brit lives in a flat and takes out the rubbish. And you've got to be careful what you ask for with your tea, right? Because a cookie in the US is a biscuit in the UK. You know, it's not just the words themselves, but it's also how we spell them. American English, a lot of the time, takes a more streamlined approach. It drops the U in words like color, it swaps RE for in center, and it tends to use I's instead of ice. It's a really subtle thing, but it's a super consistent difference you'll spot in writing from both sides of the Atlantic. Okay, so we've covered the written word, but now let's go deeper into the actual music of the language, pronunciation. And one of the biggest clues to an accent is where the speaker decides to put the stress in a word. So what even is word stress? Well, simply put, it's the syllable you emphasize when you speak. You can think of it like the heartbeat of a word. By making one little part of it longer and louder and maybe a little higher in pitch, you make it stand out. And as we're about to see, Brits and Americans often feel that beat in completely different places. Take this word, for instance. In Britain, you'd almost always hear the emphasis right at the beginning, garage. You hear that? How that first syllable just kind of pops? But now listen to the American version. The stress completely shifts to the end, garage. It's the same word, same letters, but it sounds completely different, all because of that stress pattern. And here's the really cool part. This isn't random. There's a fascinating historical pattern here, especially with words that English borrowed from French way back after the Norman invasion in 1066. American English often keeps the stress on that final syllable, which is actually closer to the original French, while British English tends to pull that stress toward the beginning of the word. All right, now let's uncover a really subtle, almost secret rule of North American English pronunciation. This is one that makes certain words that are spelled totally differently, sound exactly the same. It's a phenomenon called alveolar flapping. Now that sounds super technical, I know, but trust me, the idea is actually really simple. In American English, when a T sound gets caught between two vowel sounds, it softens into a quick D sound. And this is where you can really hear the magic of flapping. The word ladder becomes totally indistinguishable from ladder. Writer sounds just like rider. And depending on the accent, winter can sound identical to winter. It's this one subtle rule that's one of the most distinctive features of the North American accent. Okay, we have saved the biggest, most obvious pronunciation clue for last, the letter R. And the story of why it's pronounced so strongly in America but often dropped in England, well, it's not really about linguistics at all. It's about social status and history. This all comes down to something called rhoticity. Rhotic accents, which is what you hear in most of North America, pronounce the R sound wherever it appears in a word. You park the car. It's a hard R. But non-rhotic accents, which are really common in southern England, they drop that R sound unless it's followed by a vowel. So you park the car. So this brings us to a central puzzle, right? If English came from England, wouldn't the American accent be the one that changed? Why does it feel like it's actually the other way around? Well, the answer is a fantastic historical twist. Okay, so here's the timeline that explains everything. Back in the early 1700s, pretty much everyone who spoke English pronounced their R's. That includes the American colonists. But later that century, a brand new trend popped up in the fashionable circles of London. Dropping the R sound suddenly became a signal of high status. This new, non-rhotic accent became the standard of prestige in southern England, while the American accent, separated by an ocean, actually preserved the older way of speaking. So let's look even closer at the real driving force behind this change, because it reveals a powerful truth. How we speak has always been deeply connected to social class. You know, as the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu argued, language isn't just about communicating. It's also a tool for social distinction. Your accent, your choice of words, they became instant signals of your background, your education, your social standing. It was a really quick way to establish who was in and who was out. Just try to imagine it. Picture yourself as an ambitious merchant in 18th century London. If you wanted to be accepted by the elite, you had to adopt their ways, and that included their new, fashionable, non-rhotic accent. It was a conscious social strategy. It proved that how you talked could be just as important as how much money you had. And look, this isn't just some theory. Sociolinguists have actually studied this and found a direct link. The higher a person's social status, or even their aspirations for a higher status, the more likely they were to adopt that prestigious non-rhotic accent. It's just a perfect example of how society itself shapes the very sounds of our language. So, all of this leaves us with a final, really fascinating question. If social prestige in 18th century London created one of the biggest divides in the English language, what forces are shaping it today? I mean, think about it. Global media, the internet, migration. Our language is always evolving, and the next big change might be happening right now as we speak. So, what do you think will shape the accents of tomorrow?